Hi, welcome to my channel, welcome to the Throttle Cable, and this video is going to be a buyer's guide on a Porsche 996. It's me right at the start of my journey. It's a buying journey. I'm going to go out there and buy a Porsche 996 and share that story with you. So I thought right at the start, a buyer's guide as to what I'm looking for and why, try and share a bit of knowledge and hopefully help some people out that are on a buying journey. So who am I? Well, I'm just a private buyer. I'm a bit of a Porsche geek. I've bought several Porsches in the past, different flavours from bog standard, Carreras, Caymans, Spiders, GT3s. I started off in a 996 and I want to go back to a 996. And after having owned one, I've got some very specific wishes that I want to tick off and have that as a fun car to own. So I'll start off as what I'm looking for, and I'll give you some reasons why, talk about that buying decision, what I'm going to be looking out for around, under, in the car, the engine, etc., and talk about some of the options as to why I may or may not be looking for them. So to start off with, what am I looking for? The basic spec of the car. I'm looking for an early 3.4, so the 996.1. I'm looking for one of them very specifically, and that's because I want a car that has a cable-driven throttle, not a fly-by-wire throttle. So the very first year of production, it had a physical cable connecting your right foot to the engine, and I love that mechanical simplicity, and I love the responsiveness that will give to the car. The 3.4 is also a much more zingy, free revving engine, and it's what the engine was designed to be from the start. So I'm looking for that car. I'm looking for something with a great service history. The service record is really important on these cars. If they're not well maintained, they break and they're expensive. I'm looking for a car that's loved. I want to buy it from an enthusiast. A car at this level, I'm not looking to buy it from a dealer. I want to know that somebody has cared for it, loved it, and will have the same passion for Porsche that I do as well. In terms of the spec, I'm looking for something that's got an aero kit, because I like the style. It's chalk and cheese, you may or may not like it. I'm looking for a real basic spec other than that. I don't want all the bells and whistles that seem to attract quite a huge high buyer's premium. And I'm looking for a sunroof. Lots of people tend not to like a sunroof. I don't understand why. This is not going to be a race car, this is a fun car for the road. Open up the roof, let the sun in, and have some more fun. So what am I not looking for? Two things on these cars that seem to draw a big premium is the MO30 suspension and the limited slip diff. Now, the car I'm going to be looking for is most likely going to have in the range of 60,000 to 100,000 miles already driven on it. Anything too much less of that, say like a 30,000 mile car, it's been sat around for too long, all of the rubbers are going to be perishing, and there's going to be bits going wrong just because the car is very stagnant and stale. I want something that's been driven but not been driven excessively. So when you're getting to that range, these parts where if you're looking at the MO30 suspension, you're going to basically be paying a premium for worn out old shock absorbers that you're probably going to want to replace anyway, and some rusty bars, anti-roll bars that are going across the car that you may end up replacing for something firmer in the fullness of time, and also a limited slip diff that tends to need a rebuild after 50,000 miles. People with cars of that age won't have taken that maintenance on themselves because they're looking to shift the cars, and people like me are going to be buying them. So why pay a premium for that? I'm just going to be buying a real basic spec car with the bits on it I want, and then looking to replace the suspension and a limit slip diff myself for something that is higher spec and brand new, and it isn't going to give me any trouble in the future. The other reason I'm looking for a 3.4 specifically is because they have a much lower rate of bore scoring. It's the original engine, it's not been bored out to 3.6 or in the 997 to a 3.8, so it doesn't suffer from that same issue of heat which starves the bore of oil and causes those bores. Really, really rare do you ever see bore scoring in a 3.4. Right at the beginning of time they saw some chunking of metal coming off of these cars, but those issues have long since passed. So a car that's been driven, that's a 3.4, you're rarely going to come across bore scoring on a car like that. It's not impossible, but it's rare, especially if it's well serviced. The second issue that you'll probably see on the forums is the Ims failure. So the bearing that that seats the intermediate shaft, that can fail, and it's a catastrophic failure because it basically the timing is controlled off of that, or is run, I should say, not controlled, but is run off of that shaft. And yeah, if that fails, catastrophic failure within the engine and real expensive rebuild. And these 3.4s have that dual roll bearing, so you know, two rows of bull race essentially. It's much stronger. I mean, it's a serviceable part really. They're a sealed cartridge bearing that over time the rubbers will perish, the grease will wash out, and then the bearings will break down and essentially lead to failure of the engine. But preventative maintenance, you can get in there and replace that bearing anyway. And if you're going to change a diff out for a limited slip diff, you're dropping the drivetrain, absolutely perfect time. So both of those issues don't particularly concern me as long as it's a nicely well-spec car. So that's exactly what I'm going to be going to look for. So in terms of the buyer's guide, what do you want to be doing? The first thing I would say is be prepared. So understand what the car you want to buy. I've got a really specific mindset of what I'm looking for. Understand what it is you want to buy, and then start to get to know that owner. Speak to them before you go there. See what options are on that car, maybe get a view of the data sticker so you can decode some of the options that are on it, and start to have some rapport so that you know that you can trust the person you're going to go and talk to. I would never go and buy a car if I felt the person selling it was slightly suspicious. If they don't understand the car or understand the questions they're being asked, they're probably not that enthusiast that I want to buy from, that have loved the car as much as perhaps I want them to love it. So I think that's really quite important. Get the questions out up front that you want to know before you travel. Sometimes these cars can be quite far away and you don't want to get there and have any surprises. The next point of be prepared is what are you going to take with you? So a few things that I take with me. The first and most important, I think, is an LED flashlight, something a real strong, powerful light, so you can get in, look at the rads and things at the front of the car, look under the car, look around the car, start to investigate the car when you get there. The flashlight on a mobile phone is not a good substitute. You just won't get the same light out of it. The next thing I take is a paint depth gauge. They're not expensive, you can get them online. It's not going to set the world on fire in terms of the technology here, but it will give you an idea of how consistent the paint readings are around the car. If something doesn't look right with it, you can narrow down where any damage repair is and start to understand what that damage repair might be. The next thing I take is my Diagnostics Tool. This one happens to be a durometric. Take your laptop, take this, plug it all together in the car, and you can read the fault codes if anything is present on the car. And you can also read the rev range reports. So modern Porsches have a rev range of 1 to 6. 1 and 2 is approaching the red line. 3 plus is when you start to encroach over that red line. And then on the older Porsches like the 996, it has 2 rev ranges. Rev range 1 is approaching the rev line, maybe bouncing off the limiter, and 2 is once you've been mechanically driven past it. So I want to be reading the engine and understanding if the car has been over revved. So how does a car get over revved? It's got a rev limiter after all. Well, it's a mechanical drive past the limiter. So if you downshift, maybe you skip 2 gears by accident, whack the car in a lower gear, the momentum of the car will drive and flare those revs past the red line of the car and push the engine right to its limits, and that can stretch the timing chain, and again that can cause some really big issues. So using that tool, you can see how long how long ago the car has hit either of those ranges and how many ignitions it has had within it. It's quite useful for rev range 1 alone, because you can see how many times it's hit the red line, and well, not how many times, but how much time it's spent at the red line, so how many ignitions have happened at the red line, and it gives you an idea of how the car's been used. You can also look at the number of hours the car's been running versus the mileage, do a quick bit of math and work out if it was an average speed of 30 miles an hour, is the mileage reading true? It's unlikely it's been clocked, but you never know. It's a nice way to check. So once I've got all of that done, pack up all my stuff and head away, I start to look at, okay, go and see the car, approach the car and just have a good stand back, look at the overall condition of the car, and appraise it from a distance. Walk around, see if anything picks up your eye. Is there anything that looks out of place? Check the tone of the paint panel to panel. Does anything not quite match? Having any paint repairs is not an issue in itself, because it may just be to touch up some stone chips, but having a paint repair may just make you look a bit more closely as to why that's happened. Get the sight lines along the car. Even if the paint looks true panel to panel, you may see in the lacquer bit of orange peel on one, smooth panel next, and something that's not uniform around the car. Again, that just brings your attention to it, and you can start to work out, okay, so why is there a difference in paint, and what's caused that. Also check the panel gaps around the car. They should all be really uniform on a Porsche. So if they're not quite right, if they look too gappy, or if they look too close, there's a chance it's had a knock somewhere. You can start to investigate why, and just make sure you're informed before you start to buy one of these kind of cars. The other thing I like to check is the number plates front and rear. Often number plates are just replaced in pairs. So if you see different number plates front to back, it could be an indication it's had a minor bump front or rear. It's nothing to be concerned about, but again, it just draws your eye to that part of the car, and just double check and make sure why that's been done. Of course, people can just get a crack in a number plate and that's it, but just pick it up and check, and then ultimately you can see and make sure you're not buying something that's had any sort of damage. From that point, if everything is checking out nicely, start to go under the bonnet, or the frunk, as some people call it, the front bonnet, the front boot. Underneath there you'll see a data sticker. It should be present and correct right in the middle, in the centre. It carries all of the option codes, everything that was on the car when it was new, so you can double check everything is right with the standard equipment in the car. And that data sticker should also be present in the first page of the service book. Just a nice check. Now if the car's had a bit of a front end knock and that bonnet's been replaced, the sticker probably isn't there, so you can just double check the consistency for it. Pull back the carpet, you can actually look at the metalwork in front of the car and make sure everything is nice and straight and true. If you start to see any ripples or deformation in the metal, and it's an indication there's been a knock and it perhaps hasn't been repaired very well. And then if you pull back the carpet, as I'm looking at the car here, the left hand side, if you're in the front, the right hand side, you'll also have the paint code sticker, which will tell you exactly what the paint is. It'll be written as well as have the actual digited code. And yeah, you can check the car's the right colour on the code that you have on the sticker as well. While you're in there, have a look for the toolkit, have a look for the spare wheel. If it's an early car, it may just have a can of foam and no spare wheel. And also check for that locking wheel nut, because you don't want to drive away without the locking wheel nut, because it's a pain in the backside either to have the bolts removed or to go into a Porsche dealer and get them to get you a fitting wheel locking nut that matches your old set. Check around the engine bay after that, come around the back of the car. You can then look at the metalwork across the back. Same thing, you're looking at the same kind of any impact areas, any deformation in the metalwork, and just to make sure it hasn't been involved in any serious shunt. It's quite common for the front of a Porsche to be resprayed because of stone chips across the bonnet, maybe across the wings, and especially across the front bumper. So just be aware of any kind of paintwork that's been done to a high standard, and just work out why it's been done. Is it hiding something more sinister, or is it just literally for some stone chips? Once you've done all that, I guess it's then, if it checks out, it's time to look around and under the car, and that's where the torch comes in really handy. So without having to get a car up in the air, you can look through the front vents, you can get your torch on, check out the condition of the radiators, left and right, leaves collect in there and it can rot out the radiators from the bottom. Look under the car, check for any coolant leaks. If there is coolant leaking, it's an obvious indicator that there's an issue with those rads, and also the pipe runs going front to rear. The trailing edge of the wheel arches, they can pick up stone chips, and yes, the car's galvanised, but if you get a chip that goes through the galvanisation, then yeah, you can start to get rust spots, and it's worth just making sure that the car's in a nice condition there. And then also just check the chassis rails underneath for corrosion, for stone chips, the general condition of all of the ancillary components under the car. People say you can drive these cars whatever the weather, whatever the conditions, and you'll see on forums often there's lots of name calling for people that put these cars away over winter. But if you look at two cars side by side, one that has been put away and one that's been driven in salt, yes, the bodywork's galvanised, but everything under the car, all of the components, they're not. And you'll start to see all the corrosion across all the bolts, the bottom of the shock absorbers rusting out where the foam collects water inside the shock absorber and literally rusts them from the inside out. And even the back boxes, well, the crud gets flicked up behind the rear wheels and starts to rot out those rear mufflers. So yeah, you can tell a difference if you know the cars, and you'll want one that's been cared for, so you don't pick up the repair bill of someone else before you. Tyres are a good indicator of how well a car's been looked after. Are they premium tyres? Are they Porsche N-rated tyres? If somebody's cut cost on tyres there, it's likely that perhaps they may have cut costs elsewhere. It's the most important thing that keeps you in touch with the road. It's worth looking at. While you're looking at those, check the brake pads, what life is left in them, check the condition of the discs for any cracking, any lipping on the edges, and just make sure you're aware of what costs are coming up. Of course, these are consumable parts, they need to be replaced at some point, but just build them into the factor of you buying that car, understanding when they were last replaced and if you might need to do it yourself. Once you've done all that, maybe it's time to start looking at the engine. I'm always suspicious of a car that is warm when I get there. There's no real reason for a car to be warm when you get there because you're going to look at that car. It's nice to see it start from a cold start. You can see how much smoke comes out the back of it, for example. Is it just condensation or is it actually smoking? If the car is hot, start to ask questions why they've run it up warm before you've got there. It may be genuine that they've moved it, or they've driven to work, or they've driven home from work. But yeah, just be aware of that and why. Check the condition of the oil, pull out the dipstick. If it should be nice and clean, it's very rare that you get like a dark and dirty oil in these cars. They're changed every year and they tend not to do a lot of mileage, so it just basically should look like brand new oil. You can lift the oil reservoir cap up and have a look and see how gunky it is. You're going to see a bit of gunk and mayo on these because they've got a real long oil filler neck, so you get a bit of condensate in there. But if it's really gunky, it's likely it's been taken on lots of short journeys because the engine hasn't gone through a proper heat cycle, and that's bad. You want a car that's really been driven not a shopping car, a car that's been driven as it is, kind of a weekend toy that gets driven properly, but within the limits of the car. And you'll still get a little bit of kind of mayo under there, but just not a lot. And it's a good telltale sign that if somebody's completely cleaned it out, if there's gunk in there or if there's loads of gunk in there, then you can start to draw your own conclusions. Coming back to the bore scoring issue, you want to have a quick look at the tailpipe tips. As you're looking at it from the rear, if the left-hand tailpipe tip is really, really sooty and the one on the right shows a lot less soot, it's just an indicator of bore scoring. If the engine is tick over, and as the revs rise and falls, that ticking goes up and down with the rev range, it's another indicator of bore scoring. You shouldn't really need to get these things checked invasively. There's plenty of telltale signs before you do that. I'd also be quite wary of a car that has completely clean tailpipes. Every car deposits some soot, but it should be quite equal left to right on those tailpipe tips. If the tailpipe tips are completely clean and detailed within an inch of their life, what's the rest of the car like? If their whole car is detailed like that, then maybe, yeah, they're just a clean freak. If they're the only things that are that clean, maybe they're trying to cover something up, and it's probably worth investigating a bit further and making sure you're happy with the condition of the car. If I'm not sure about anything when I'm there in front of the car, I Google it. Don't be shy. If you don't know everything, just get on your phone, check on a forum, because everybody is looking at these cars and living with these cars day to day, so it's worth doing that. And this is the point where you might want to check the error codes out if you've brought a diagnostics with you, and just to make sure everything works as it should within the car. The next thing I'll probably move then on to is inside the car. And if you check the data sticker out before you got there, the sort of checks you're going to do inside the car, sorry, a bit of fluff flying around, is relevant to what options are on the car. You want to check out everything that you're buying works. Should be quite obvious, but this is why it's worth knowing all the options that are on the car before. It could be simple things. Does the sunroof work? Does the aircon work? Does the heater work? Do the electric seats work? Couple of things to look out for is on the sun visors, the little flaps on the mirrors, they always tend to break. They're a poor design. I believe they're also on mini R53s as well. And yeah, the hinge on them snaps, so as you flap them up, they just kind of flap around rather than stay up, and then you come to close them. Check for any water coming into the car. Check both the carpets are nice and dry left to right. Could be a sign that either a membrane's gone on the the inside of the door card on the door, because water runs down the window and then gets in that way, or it could be that one of the seals around the door has started to go. So check the condition of all of those, because you want your car to stay dry, and if it's an issue, door membrane's cheap, but the seals are actually really quite expensive, so you want to make sure you don't get caught out there. Be realistic, you know, these cars are 20 years old, there's going to be wear and tear on the inside, but it should be in the same keeping as the mileage of that car. If you've got a car that is showing huge amounts of wear and it's only done a light mileage, clearly there's an issue there, and vice versa the other way. You just want to make sure you're picking up something that's nice and honest. Then if you're happy with everything there, it's probably time to then look at driving the car. The first thing to think about is this is not your car, this is somebody else's pride and joy, so don't expect to jump straight in and drive the car yourself. I'm always happy for the owner of the car to drive the car around. If they drive that car around, you'll get a sense of how they're driving it. You won't be nervous that someone else is staring at you driving their precious car, and you'll probably take more in. I know I tend to. So you'll understand how they drive the car, how it's shifting, are they struggling to get in or out of gear, how they're using the clutch, are they double clutching, single clutching, where's the bite point on that clutch. You can also listen out, I think, better for the knocks and groans in the car, because you can concentrate on the noises the car is making. Make sure the aircon's off and the radio's off, so you can really hear what's happening in the car. Later on you can switch all of that stuff on and make sure it's all working, but maybe you've done that before anyway. And yeah, get a good feel for how the car's riding, how it's riding across the road surfaces, what sort of state the suspension in, and yeah, if everything checks out nice again, maybe when you get back to the car park, you can just drive it around the car park on a private bit of road, and that's really when you can start to hear the knocks and groans of the suspension. Expect some of the bushes may need replacing, expect the coffin arms may need a bit of work, and that's just the nature of these cars. Go into it with your eyes open that once you've bought a car you might need to spend some money on these consumable parts, but just be aware of which parts are going to need that work, and these kind of little tests can help you identify that. I'm expecting that suspension is going to need refreshing. Some of the bushes are all going to need refreshing, but everything else should be nice and straight. If it corrodes because it's getting old, fair enough, but as much as possible I want everything to be nice and straight and working well. Check the gear shift in the car, make sure it's nice and smooth. You can engage all of the gears nice and easily, there's no nasty crunches, there's nothing wrong with the synchro mesh, for example, and it drives as you would expect. So at that point, if everything works well, you kind of then come to your conclusion on the car. The first thing I would say is it's always good to have a second opinion. So if you can take a friend with you to look at the car, it's always good to have somebody to bounce off so you don't get lost in the moment and get a bit giddy and make a buying decision that perhaps isn't right in the long term. Don't be afraid to walk away. Don't be afraid to walk away. If you have to go a real long way to buy a car, you can often feel a little bit disappointed if you walk away without buying a car and you make a knee-jerk reaction to buy it and drive it home. I often like not to take a car away on the first visit. I like to see the car and then process everything I've seen and work out, okay, what is that car worth to me? What am I willing to pay for it? And draw a red line. Whatever it's advertised is great. That's what the seller wants and they think they might be able to achieve. Once you've seen it, you'll understand what you think it's worth and what you're willing to pay. And I tend to get my mind set first before I then go back in and look to negotiate. At that point, I'll HPI check the car, make sure there is nothing hiding in its history that I might not be happy with. I might do an internet search on the registration plate. These enthusiast cars tend to be talked about on a forum. You might see the previous owner and what they've done with that car, how they've treated it, and it could give you a sense of support in your buying decision, or it may put you off, but at least you know either way what's happening with that car. And also you've got the opportunity to talk to some previous owners. If that car has that history you might be looking for and you can see some previous owners listed there, you may be able to find them and talk to them and understand a bit more about the car as well. If you do all of that, go back and buy the damn thing. If it's the right car for you, they're great. They're great cars. I think they've got an unfair opinion out there on the internet about those two issues we spoke about earlier, and they've been blown out of proportion. They're nowhere near as bad as what they say. If it happens to you, yes, it's painful, but if you do the preventative maintenance, you can minimise that. I think pretty much every Porsche in history has some sort of issue along the way. Even the mighty Mesger engine in the GT3s, if the coolant pipes pop off, then you've got some serious catastrophic failure there too, which is why people tend to pin them. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. I'd love to know if you're going on that journey too. Maybe we can chat, maybe we can see what everybody else is looking to buy, why they're looking to buy it, and get some opinion. But I found a car I know I like from afar. I'm going to go and look at it. We're in the depths of December now, and hopefully before the new year I'll have a new 996 on my driveway if everything checks out, and I'll be able to share with you the result of that. So yeah, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for coming this far. If you liked it, subscribe, and hopefully I can share the next one with you too. Thank you.